I found out my own sister had moved into my beach house without permission when a courier rang my doorbell, handed me a thick envelope, and smiled as if he was delivering good news, because inside was a detailed invoice addressed to me for brand new furniture I had never seen, never chosen, and never agreed to pay for. And I remember standing there in shock thinking, how is this even real? And more importantly, was I wrong for what I did next? Because I need you to tell me honestly if you would have reacted any differently in my place. Before I even explain how we got here, let me just say this: I own a small beach house that I worked my entire adult life to afford. And my sister thought she could just take it over, redecorate it to her taste, and then casually send me the bill like I was some kind of ATM with legs. So tell me right now, if your own family did this to you, would you have stayed calm, or would you have absolutely lost it like I almost did? So let me rewind to the beginning, because none of this happened overnight. And looking back, there were signs I ignored because I wanted to believe my sister would never cross a line this big. I'm the older sibling, always have been the responsible one, the one who saved, planned, and delayed gratification. My sister, on the other hand, has always lived life like the safety net would magically appear under her feet, no matter how reckless her jump was. She's charming, social, and very good at convincing people that her emergencies are somehow everyone else's responsibility. Growing up, my parents enabled it without realizing it. If she forgot her rent, they helped. If she quit another job because her boss was toxic, they supported her emotionally and financially. Meanwhile, I was praised for being independent, which sounds nice until you realize it meant I was expected to handle everything alone. The beach house itself is important context. I bought it 5 years ago after more than a decade of saving. I don't come from money, so this wasn't some casual investment. It was my dream, my reward to myself, a small, cozy place right by the water where I could escape city noise, work remotely, and finally feel like all those years of sacrifice meant something. I didn't rent it out much. Sometimes I stayed there for weeks, sometimes months, and other times it sat empty except for a caretaker who checked on it. My family knew about it, of course, and I had invited them there before, including my sister, but always as a guest, always with clear boundaries. About a year ago, my sister went through what she called a rough patch, which in her language meant she'd broken up with her boyfriend, quit another job, and decided she needed a fresh start. She started dropping hints about the beach, about how healing the ocean is, how she just needed a place to think, to reset, to find herself. I was sympathetic, but I was also cautious. I told her she could visit for a week or two if I was there, but I wasn't offering it as a long-term solution. She laughed it off and said, "Relax. I'm not trying to steal your house." That sentence haunts me now. Then came the calls. First it was, "Hey, would you mind if I stayed there for a few days while you're not using it?" I said no, gently but clearly, because the house wasn't insured for long-term guests and because I valued my privacy. She sounded disappointed but said she understood, or at least I thought she did. A few weeks later, she mentioned again how expensive her rent was, how stressed she felt, how she couldn't focus on finding work in her tiny apartment. I listened, I empathized, but I didn't budge. Looking back, I think she took my listening as weakness. What I didn't know was that during this time, she was talking to other family members. My mom casually mentioned one day, "Your sister loves that beach house of yours. It's such a shame it's empty so often." That comment made my stomach twist, but I brushed it off. I trusted that my no meant no. That was my mistake. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I was buried in work, pulling long hours, stressed, exhausted. I hadn't been to the beach house in a while, and honestly, I was looking forward to a quiet month there once my project wrapped up. Then I got that envelope. Inside was a multi-page invoice from an upscale furniture store near the coast. New couch, new dining table, bed frame, mattress, rugs, lamps, wall art, even kitchenware. The total was more than some people make in half a year. And at the bottom, in a neat little note, it said, "Paid deposit. Remaining balance due Thanks for letting me make the place feel like home. Signed with my sister's name. My hands were shaking. I called her immediately, and she didn't answer. I texted her. Nothing. I checked my voicemail. There was a message from an unknown number saying, "Hi. Just wanted to confirm delivery went smoothly at your beach house." That's when it hit me. She wasn't visiting. She had moved in. I drove there the next morning. The entire drive, my mind was racing. Part of me was furious, another part was in disbelief, and a small, stupid part of me was still trying to justify it, telling myself there must be a misunderstanding. When I arrived, I barely recognized the place. My furniture was gone, not rearranged, gone. Replaced with expensive, trendy pieces that looked like they belonged in a catalog. My neutral, calming decor had been swapped for bold colors and statement pieces that screamed her personality, not mine. And there she was, barefoot, coffee in hand, acting completely at ease, like this was always her home. She smiled and said, "Surprise." I asked her what she thought she was doing, and she looked genuinely confused by my anger. She said, "I knew you'd freak out if I asked, so I figured once it was done, you'd see it makes sense." That sentence still makes my blood boil. She went on to explain how the house was wasted on me, how she needed it more, how the changes were an investment, and how I should be grateful she improved the place. I told her to pack her things and leave. She laughed, actually laughed. She said I was being dramatic, that family doesn't kick family out, and that if I really wanted her gone, I could least pay her back for the furniture because she couldn't afford to eat the cost. That's when she showed me her version of the bill, neatly itemized, like this was a business transaction. We argued for hours. She accused me of being selfish, of hoarding property, of not caring about her mental health. I accused her of trespassing, of stealing, of violating my trust. At one point, she said, "Mom agrees with me, by the way." That hurt more than I expected. I left that day without resolving anything because I was afraid I'd say something unforgivable. That night, my phone exploded with messages from family members. Some told me to be understanding. Some said I should let her stay for a while. Others said the furniture did look nice, as if that was the point. A few quietly admitted she was wrong, but suggested I compromise to keep the peace. I didn't sleep at all. I kept replaying everything, wondering how my boundaries had been so thoroughly ignored. Here's where I want to pause for a second, because this is the point where I had to make a choice that would change everything. So that was the situation I was in, standing between being the good sibling everyone expected me to be and protecting something I had worked my entire life for. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to stop for a moment and comment what you would have done if you were me. Would you have let her stay? Would you have paid the bill just to end the drama, or would you have drawn a hard line no matter the fallout? After that night, I knew doing nothing wasn't an option. I went back to the beach house the next day, determined to reclaim it, but what I found made things even worse. Not only had she moved in, she had started treating the place like a permanent residence. Mail addressed to her. Food stocked in the fridge. Her clothes in every closet. She had even thrown out some of my personal items because they didn't fit the vibe. When I confronted her about that, she rolled her eyes and said, "You weren't using them anyway." I told her she had 1 week to leave. She told me she'd talk to a lawyer. That scared me more than I want to admit. Not because she was right, but because I knew how messy this could get. I called a friend who works in real estate law, and he confirmed what I already knew. She had no legal right to be there. But he also warned me that family disputes like this can get ugly fast. I tried one last calm conversation. I sat her down and explained, slowly, carefully, that this house was my sanctuary, that her moving in without permission was a massive betrayal, and that sending me a bill crossed every line imaginable. She listened, then said, "You'll get over it. You always do." That's when something in me snapped, not in a screaming way, but in a quiet, cold realization that she truly believed I would cave, just like everyone else always had. That's where I'll stop for now, because what I did next is where things really exploded, and the consequences were bigger than I ever expected. If you think this situation is already insane, trust me, it only gets worse from here, and in the next part, I'll tell you exactly how I handled it, how my family reacted, and whether I regret my decision or not. When I left off, I was standing in my own beach house, listening to my sister tell me, with absolute confidence, that I would get over it. And in that moment something inside me finally hardened in a way it never had before. Because I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated move based on a lifetime of people rescuing her from consequences. And I knew if I didn't draw the hardest line of my life, right then, I would be paying for this decision for the rest of my life, financially and emotionally. I wish I could tell you that I stormed out and immediately called the police, or changed the locks, or did something dramatic like you see in movies. But real life isn't that clean. What I did instead was quieter and, in some ways, more devastating. I went back to the city, sat in my apartment, surrounded by unopened mail and half-drunk cups of coffee, and started making calls. First to my lawyer friend again, then to my insurance company, then to the property caretaker, and finally to a storage company near the beach. Every call made this feel more real, more irreversible, and with every step, my hands shook less and my resolve grew stronger. I sent my sister a single text message that night. It said, "You are not authorized to live in my property. You have 7 days to vacate. Any furniture you purchased without my consent is your responsibility. I will not pay for it." She replied within seconds, which told me she had been waiting for the fight. Her response was a long paragraph accusing me of cruelty, of abandoning her when she was vulnerable, of choosing money over family. She ended it with, "Mom is crying because of you." That line almost broke me, because it was designed to, but I didn't respond. The next day, my mother called. I could hear the disappointment in her voice before she even said hello. She told me my sister was devastated, that she felt unwanted, that she'd poured her heart into making the beach house beautiful. I reminded my mother that it was my house, that no one had asked my permission, and that I was being treated like the villain for enforcing a boundary that should never have been crossed. My mother sighed and said, "Can't you just let her stay a few months?" That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about my sister. This was about a family dynamic that had been broken for decades, with me silently absorbing responsibility so others could avoid discomfort. As the week went on, things escalated. My sister stopped answering my calls entirely. Instead, she posted photos on social media of her beach life, sunsets, coffee mugs on the deck, captions about healing and new beginnings. People commented about how lucky she was. I felt sick every time I saw one. Friends started texting me asking if I'd given her the house. That humiliation, the public rewriting of my reality, fueled my determination more than anger ever could. On the 5th day, my lawyer friend sent a formal notice to vacate, delivered by courier, the same way I'd received the furniture bill. I won't pretend it felt good, but it felt necessary. When she got it, all hell broke loose. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding on the door, screaming my name. When I opened it, she burst into tears, then into rage, then back into tears so fast it was dizzying. She accused me of ruining her life, of embarrassing her, of threatening her with legal action like a stranger. I told her calmly that she had ruined her own situation by assuming she could take what wasn't hers. That's when she dropped another bomb. She told me she'd already sold my old furniture, not donated, not stored, sold, to cover some costs. I felt something cold spread through my chest. Those pieces weren't just furniture, they were memories, things I'd chosen carefully, lived with, loved. I told her she needed to pay me back for them immediately. She shrugged and said she didn't have the money. I closed the door in her face. Literally, I slid down against it afterward and cried harder than I had in years. Not just for the furniture or the house, but for the realization that the sister I thought I had didn't exist. The deadline came and went. She didn't leave. Instead, she doubled down. She told family members I was threatening to make her homeless. She told mutual friends that I was unstable, obsessed with control. Some believed her, some didn't. The silence from those who chose not to get involved hurt almost as much as the accusations. So I followed through. I coordinated with the caretaker and a locksmith. I made sure everything was done legally, by the book, with notice and documentation. On the day the locks were changed, I drove to the beach house myself. I didn't tell her I was coming. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, to reclaim something that felt like it had been stolen not just physically, but emotionally. She wasn't there when I arrived. The house was empty of people, but full of her presence. Her furniture, her decorations, her life scattered everywhere. The locksmith finished his work quietly. When he handed me the new keys, my hands were steady. That surprised me. I expected guilt, fear, something dramatic. Instead, I felt a deep, bone-level calm. She showed up an hour later. I watched from the deck as her car pulled in. As she walked up to the door, as confusion turned into panic when her key didn't work. She started banging, shouting, demanding. I stepped outside and told her she no longer had access to my property. She screamed that I couldn't do this, that she had rights. I told her she had crossed the line when she moved in without permission and sent me a bill like I owed her something. She collapsed onto the steps, crying, accusing me of heartlessness in front of the caretaker, who looked deeply uncomfortable. I offered to let her collect her personal belongings later under supervision. I told her I would not store her furniture and I would not pay for it. She called me names I won't repeat here. Then she left. The aftermath was brutal. My phone didn't stop ringing for weeks. Family gatherings became tense or non-existent. Some relatives refused to speak to me. Others quietly admitted they admired what I did, but would never have had the courage themselves. My mother took months to come around, and even now, our relationship is strained. She still thinks I could have handled it more gently. I think she confuses gentleness with self-erasure. Financially, I had to deal with the mess my sister left behind. I sold some of the furniture she'd brought in, not to make a point, but because I didn't want constant reminders of how it got there. I replaced my old pieces slowly, intentionally, reclaiming the space in my own way. The house feels like mine again, but different, marked by experience. As for my sister, she moved in with a friend, then another, then back with my parents for a while. She told people I kicked her out, leaving out the part where she broke in metaphorically and emotionally. We barely speak now. When we do, it's polite and distant, like strangers who share a history neither wants to revisit. Sometimes I miss who I thought she was. Sometimes I feel relief more than sadness. Do I regret it? That's the question everyone asks. And the honest answer is no, even though it cost me peace in the short term. What it gave me was something I'd never had before. The certainty that my boundaries matter, even when enforcing them makes me the villain in someone else's story. If there's a lesson here, it's this: being the responsible one doesn't mean being endlessly available for exploitation. And family doesn't get a free pass to disrespect you just because they share your blood. Standing up for yourself might fracture relationships, but losing yourself to keep others comfortable is a slower, quieter kind of destruction. If you were on my side in this mess, like this video, if you think I went too far, tell me why in the comments, because I genuinely want to hear other perspectives. Subscribe for more stories like this, because unfortunately, life seems to have no shortage of them. Share your final thoughts below, and I'll see you all in the next story.